It was a cold morning in a small town where the sun always seemed to rise late. The streets were quiet, but one small house had its lights on. Inside, a young boy named Aarav sat by the window clutching a notebook. His eyes were full of dreams, but his world was full of limits. Aarav wasn't born rich. His father worked at a local factory, and his mother sold food from a small stall. Every day after school, Aarav helped her carry heavy boxes. But even as his muscles ached, his mind was soaring somewhere else. He'd often look at the sky and whisper to himself, "One day, I will make my dream real." But dreams weren't a popular currency in his town. People around him would laugh. "Dreams? In this town? You can't even afford proper shoes," his classmates would say, their words like sharp little stones. But Aarav never replied. He just smiled. He knew something they didn't. Dreams were free, and one day, his would be priceless. At school, Aarav wasn't a star pupil. His grades were just average, and his teachers often mistook his quiet nature for laziness. But nobody saw the fire burning inside his heart. He didn't just want to pass. He wanted to build, to create, to become more than anyone expected. One evening, walking home, Aarav saw a poster taped to the school wall. National Talent Competition. Winners get scholarship and training. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was as if the universe had cracked open a small door just for him. He carefully took the poster, his fingers tracing the words as he whispered, "This is it. This is where my dream begins." That night he showed it to his parents. His father let out a sad laugh. "Son," he said gently, "those competitions are for rich kids. We can't even afford the entry fee." Aarav didn't argue. He just nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. But the light in his eyes didn't dim, not even for a second. From that day on, everything changed. Aarav became a shadow, saving every single coin he earned. He stopped buying little snacks, skipped outings with friends, and took on any small job he could find after school. His friends noticed his withdrawal. "What's the point, Aarav?" they'd tease. "You'll never reach that level." His only response was a quiet, determined smile. Then came the day that almost broke him. In class, his teacher, frustrated with his distraction, singled him out. "Dreams don't work for people like you, Aarav," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You should focus on real life." The classroom erupted in laughter. Aarav said nothing. He just looked down, his knuckles white as he gripped his notebook. That afternoon, he walked home alone in the pouring rain. His thin shirt was soaked through, but a different kind of storm was raging inside him. He stopped and stared at his blurred reflection in a street puddle, and in a voice barely audible above the rain, he whispered, "If they can't believe in me, then I will believe in myself." He didn't sleep that night. By the dim light of a single candle, he sat at his small wooden table, the sound of his pen scratching against paper filling the silence. Page after page, he wrote and rewrote his plans, his hopes, his frustrations. As the first light of dawn crept into the room, one page stood out. On it were just 3 words, written in big, bold letters, "I will rise." From that moment, a new Aarav was born. No more waiting for permission, no more hoping for belief from others. He woke up before the sun, worked with a tireless energy, and studied like his life depended on it. Everyone around him saw the change, this strange, intense fire in his eyes. But nobody knew what was coming. Aarav had made a silent promise to himself, a promise to prove the world wrong. And this was just the beginning of his story. In a small town where the sun was always fashionably late, a young boy named Aarav sat by his window, a notebook clutched in his hands. His eyes held galaxies of dreams, but his world was just a single tiny star. Aarav wasn't born with a silver spoon. His dad was a factory worker, his mom sold food from a small stall, and his daily routine involved hauling heavy boxes after school. But as he worked, his mind soared. He'd look up at the vast sky and whisper to himself, "One day I will make my dream real." Of course, people laughed. "Dreams? In this town? You can't even afford proper shoes," His classmates would jeer. Aarav never fought back. He just offered a quiet smile. He knew a secret they didn't. Dreams are free, but one day, his would be priceless. School wasn't his strong suit. His grades were just average, and his teachers mistook his quiet nature for laziness. They couldn't see the fire in his heart, the desire to build, to create, to simply be more. Then, one evening, a poster on the school wall changed everything. National talent competition. Winners get scholarship and training. His heart hammered against his ribs. It felt like the universe had cracked open a door just for him. Holding the poster, he whispered, "This is it. This is where my dream begins." That night he shared the news with his parents. His father's laugh was laced with sadness. "Son," he said, "those competitions are for the rich kids. We can't even afford the entry fee." Aarav said nothing, just a silent nod, but the light in his eyes refused to dim. From that moment on, his life transformed. He became a master of saving, hoarding every single coin he earned. Snacks, fun with friends, all of it went out the window. He took on small jobs, working tirelessly. His friends noticed his newfound silence and teased him. "What's the point? You'll never make it." Aarav's only reply was that same silent smile. But one day the world tried to break him. In front of the entire class, his teacher scoffed, "Dreams don't work for people like you, Aarav. You should focus on real life." The classroom erupted in laughter. Aarav just looked down, his knuckles white as he gripped his notebook. He walked home alone in the pouring rain, drenched on the outside but a fire raging within. Staring at his own reflection in a puddle, he made a vow. "If they can't believe in me, I will believe in myself." He didn't sleep that night. By the light of a single flickering candle, he filled his notebook page after page. But as the sun rose, one page stood out bearing just 3 words in bold, defiant letters: "I will rise." That was the turning point. No more waiting for permission, no more seeking approval. He woke up earlier, worked later, and studied with a ferocity no one had ever seen in him. A strange, powerful energy surrounded him. People were puzzled, but they had no idea what was about to happen. Aarav had made a silent promise to himself, and he was just getting started on his journey to prove them all wrong. The big day was finally here. Aarav stood outside the massive building hosting the national talent competition. His hands weren't shaking from fear, but from pure, raw excitement. He glanced at the crowd, all confident faces, expensive clothes, kids from big cities. For a fleeting moment, he felt small, out of place. But then, he remembered the promise he made to himself. He whispered, "I didn't come this far just to doubt myself now." Inside the hall, the energy was electric. Cameras flashed like lightning, stern-faced judges sat behind a long, imposing table, and hundreds of participants were gearing up to present their best. Aarav found a quiet corner, clutching his small, worn notebook, the same one where he'd written his dream every single night. When his name was called, he took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were so bright they were almost blinding. For a terrifying second, his mind went completely blank. The audience waited, and a heavy silence filled the room. Then, slowly, he began to speak. He shared his idea, his creation, his project, the one he had poured months of his life into, fueled by limited resources and endless, relentless effort. His voice trembled at first, but with every word it grew stronger, steadier. He wasn't just presenting, he was speaking from his heart. Every sentence carried his struggles, his hopes, his unwavering dream. When he finished, there was a brief, tense silence. Then a polite, almost lukewarm applause rippled through the crowd. Aarav managed a nervous smile and walked off the stage, his heart pounding in his chest. The hours dragged on. One by one, other contestants presented. They were polished, confident, and their projects seemed so much grander. Aarav watched quietly, and with each presentation his heart sank a little deeper. He started to feel that maybe his best wasn't good enough. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The hall fell silent as one of the judges stepped up to the microphone. And the winner of this year's national talent competition is... Aarav held his breath, a tiny spark of hope still flickering within him. Rohan Mehta from Delhi. The hall erupted with cheers. Balloons rained down from the ceiling. Cameras flashed wildly. Aarav's smile froze on his face. He felt his heart break silently, into a million pieces. He clapped softly for the winner, but his eyes were heavy, stinging with unshed tears. He slipped out of the hall, avoiding the celebratory crowd. The world around him seemed to blur. He found a quiet corner near the gate and sank to the ground. For the first time in months, he felt completely and utterly lost. He whispered to the empty air, "Maybe they were right, and maybe dreams don't work for people like me." A cold wind brushed past him. He stared at the ground, thinking about all the sleepless nights, all the coins he'd saved, all the sacrifices he and his family had made, and now, it was all for nothing. He opened his notebook and stared at the words he'd written so many times. "I will rise." For the first time, he didn't believe them. A single tear dropped onto the page, smudging the ink. Just then, an old man, one of the event staff, walked past. He stopped, looked at Aarav's slumped shoulders and said gently, "You look disappointed, son." Aarav just nodded, his throat too tight to speak. "I failed." The man smiled kindly. "You didn't fail. You just started. Every great dream starts with a fall. The real question is, will you rise after it?" Aarav looked up at him, the man's simple words cutting through his despair. The man gave his shoulder a reassuring pat and walked away. But his words echoed in Aarav's mind. "You didn't fail. You just started." That night, back in his small room, Aarav didn't cry anymore. He opened his notebook again. Right under the blurred words, "I will rise," he wrote a new line. "I failed once, but I won't stop." He closed the notebook, and a different kind of smile touched his lips. Not a smile of victory, but one of newfound strength. He realized something incredibly important that night. Success isn't for those who never fall. It's for those who fall, get bruised, and still find the courage to get back up. And that's exactly what Aarav decided to do. He looked out his window at the familiar stars he used to share his dreams with, and whispered, "This time, I'll come back stronger." This story reminds us that failure is not the end. It's a necessary part of the journey. If you've ever felt like Aarav, remember that your story isn't over yet. After that night, something deep inside Aarav awakened. He no longer cried over his failure. Instead, he studied it. He watched videos of the winners, read about their preparation, and realized one thing: they weren't necessarily better than him. They were just better prepared. That truth hit him hard, but instead of breaking him, it built him. From that day forward, Aarav's entire routine changed. He started waking up before dawn when the world was still dark and silent. While others slept, he worked. While others laughed, he learned. Every failure became his lesson. Every mistake, his teacher. His room became his entire world. His notebook became his trusted guide. He stopped caring about what people said. The same people who once laughed at him now whispered in corners, "What is he doing?" Aarav didn't answer them. He just kept moving forward, his eyes fixed on his goal. At first, progress was painfully slow. He would spend hours studying, only to fail again and again in his practice sessions. But he refused to stop. Every time he stumbled, he would whisper to himself, "Get up, Aarav. The world doesn't stop for your pain." He started exercising too, believing that a strong body builds a strong mind. Every morning he ran through the empty streets of his town, repeating the same line over and over in his head, "I will rise. I will rise." His hands had scars from endless writing. His books were worn out. His eyes were tired. But his heart, it was on fire. Months passed. The same boy who once doubted himself now stood unshaken. Even his teachers began to notice the shift. One of them said, "Aarav, I don't know what changed in you, but whatever it is, never lose it." He just smiled and replied, "It's not change, sir. It's focus." His parents, who once feared he was wasting his time, started to see the difference. Aarav's confidence had a new glow. His father asked him one night, "You're really going to try again, aren't you?" Aarav looked up from his book and said softly, "Yes, but this time I'm not trying to prove them wrong. I'm proving myself right." That single line showed who he had become, not a boy chasing approval, but a fighter chasing growth. One evening, while Aarav was practicing in the park, a small boy came up to him. "Bahaya, you failed last time, right?" the boy asked innocently. Aarav smiled. "Yes, I did." "Then why are you trying again?" Aarav looked at the beautiful sunset and said, "Because failing once doesn't mean I'm finished. It just means my story isn't over yet." The boy nodded and ran away, but those words stayed in the air, words that could inspire anyone listening. Slowly but surely, Aarav started getting better. His ideas improved, his presentation became stronger, and his confidence grew. He didn't wait for motivation anymore, he became his own motivation. Every night he ended his day by writing in his notebook. But now, instead of just one line, he wrote a full sentence. "I will not stop until I make my dream real." Then one morning, a letter arrived. Aarav opened it with shaking hands. It was from the same organization that held the competition last year. "We invite you to participate in the National Talent Competition, Season 2. For a moment he froze. His heart started racing. This was it, his second chance. He smiled, looked up at the sky and whispered, "Round 2, dream. Let's see what you've got." But deep down he knew this time would be even harder. New faces, stronger competition, and higher stakes. Still, Aarav was ready. He had fallen once, but now he had something he didn't have before. Unbreakable determination. He packed his bag, took his notebook, and said to himself, "I may fail again, but I'll never quit again." And with that, Aarav began the next chapter of his journey. Not as a boy chasing a dream, but as a man becoming his dream. The train whistle blew, a sharp, familiar sound cutting through the early morning chill. There he was, Aarav, standing on the platform with a small bag in one hand and his old, worn-out notebook in the other. This wasn't just paper and ink. It was the keeper of a dream that had once shattered him. Now it was the very thing that brought him back stronger than ever. He was heading to the capital for the National Talent Competition Season 2. This time there was no fear in his heart. Only fire. The fire of a boy who had fallen, learned from the ashes, and was now rising again. As the train rattled forward, the world outside blurred into a tapestry of villages, fields, and cities. But inside Aarav's mind, there was a profound calm. He replayed every sleepless night, every whispered insult, every tear he'd swallowed. Those painful moments weren't weaknesses anymore. They were his armor, his strength. Arriving in the city was like stepping into another world. Skyscrapers piercing the clouds, roads buzzing with relentless energy, faces radiating confidence. But the old fear was gone. Aarav looked at the urban giant and whispered to himself, "This time I belong here." The competition hall was a magnificent beast, even larger than he remembered. Hundreds of hopefuls, the best from every corner of the country, filled the space. Each one was talented, confident, and hungry for the win. Aarav, in his simple shirt, carrying his project in a small bag, quietly found his way through the crowd. He caught the smirks, the condescending glances. "Small-town boy again?" someone murmured, just loud enough to be heard. Aarav heard it, but this time, he didn't flinch. He had discovered the immense power of silence. He found a corner seat, opened his notebook, and just before his name, he wrote 2 small words. This time. The days leading up to the competition were a blur of intense focus. Aarav practiced every single detail, not chasing perfection, but progress. He ate little, slept less, his entire being poured into his work. And then, the day came. The same stage, the same blinding lights, but a completely different Aarav. Standing behind the curtain, his heart hammered against his ribs, not with fear but with raw, unbridled passion. He saw his mother's tired smile in his mind's eye, felt his father's unwavering faith, and heard the old man's words echo. "You didn't fail. You just started." Aarav. His name echoed through the hall. He walked onto the stage, the spotlight finding him instantly. The judge's eyes were fixed on him, the audience a sea of silent faces. He began to speak. His voice was steady, confident, and crystal clear. He unveiled his new creation, a project refined by failure, polished by perseverance, and filled with his entire heart. He didn't just talk about the mechanics, he talked about the journey. He spoke of how failure had been his greatest teacher, how dreams demand resilience, and how crucial it is to believe in yourself when no one else does. As he spoke, a hush fell over the auditorium. There was something undeniably real in his words, something pure and powerful. He wasn't just presenting a project, he was sharing a piece of his soul. When he finished, there was a beat of profound silence. And then, it erupted. Applause. Not polite clapping, but a roaring, emotional wave of sound that washed over him. Aarav bowed his head, fighting back tears. He knew this wasn't the victory itself, but it was a sign. He was closer. Back in his small room that night, sleep was a distant friend. The sound of the applause still rang in his ears. A small smile played on his lips. For the first time, the outcome didn't matter. Winning or losing felt secondary. Deep down, he knew he had already won the most important battle, the one against his own fear, his doubt, his past. The next morning, however, the familiar knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. It was the final day, the announcement, the moment of truth. The air in the hall was thick with unspoken tension. The head judge approached the microphone, a single sheet of paper in his hand. Aarav squeezed his eyes shut, his palms slick with sweat. The judge smiled. And the winner of this year's national talent competition is... A torturous pause hung in the air. Aarav's heart stopped. To be announced after a short break. A collective groan swept through the crowd. Aarav let out a shaky breath, his heart pounding like a drum. He looked up, a sense of calm washing over him, and whispered to the ceiling, "Whatever happens next, I'm ready." The hall was silent. The lights dimmed as everyone waited. Aarav sat in the third row, his heart pounding. From the outside, he was calm, but inside, a storm was raging. This wasn't just about a result. It was about a moment that could change everything. The head judge walked onto the stage holding a piece of paper. "Thank you for your patience," he announced. "Every participant has shown great talent, but there is one who truly inspired us, not just with skill, but with heart." Aarav's eyes lifted. He didn't blink. The judge smiled slightly and said the name everyone was waiting for. "Aarav Sharma." For a second, Aarav didn't move. He thought he'd misheard. Then the crowd erupted into applause, loud, long, and unstoppable. People were on their feet, cheering. The lights found him, and tears welled in his eyes. He stood up slowly, his legs trembling. As he walked toward the stage, memories flooded his mind. The failures, the sleepless nights, the insults, the weight of his entire journey heavy with each step. The judge handed him the trophy. Aarav held it with shaking hands. It wasn't just a trophy, it was proof. Proof that dreams do come true, even for those who start with nothing. The host gave him the microphone. "Aarav, you've done something incredible. What do you want to say?" The hall fell silent again. Aarav looked at the hundreds of faces staring back at him. He took a deep breath and his voice, though soft, was steady. "I failed once, I fell, I cried, but I didn't stop. Because the truth is, success doesn't belong to the lucky. It belongs to those who refuse to quit." The applause grew louder. Some people in the audience had tears in their eyes. He continued, "There were times when I was alone, when no one believed in me. But I learned something important. When no one believes in you, that's your chance to believe in yourself." He looked at the trophy again. "This isn't just my victory. It belongs to every dreamer who was told, 'You can't.' It belongs to every person who failed but still stood up again." The hall exploded with applause and flashing cameras. Aarav smiled, not with pride, but with a deep sense of peace. Later that night, Aarav stood alone on the hotel rooftop, trophy in hand. The city lights sparkled below. He looked up at the same stars he once whispered his dreams to and said softly, "I told you I'd make it." Tears of fulfillment streamed down his face, but even in this moment of victory, he knew this wasn't the end. He whispered to himself, "Winning is just the beginning of a bigger purpose." Aarav was no longer just a dreamer. He had become an example. He opened his old torn notebook to the last page and wrote, "I dreamed, I failed, I rose, and now I will help others rise too." He closed the notebook, smiled at the sky, and whispered, "Thank you, failure. Without you, I would have never found my strength." Years passed. The small boy from the little town was no longer just a name on a winner's list. He was now a symbol of hope for thousands of dreamers. Aarav had become a successful innovator and a sought-after speaker. His story, his journey, spread like wildfire across schools, colleges, and online platforms. People called him the boy who never gave up. But even with all the fame and success, Aarav never forgot where he came from. He would often visit his old town, those same narrow streets, that same little house, and the very stall where his mother once sold food to make ends meet. Every time he stood there, memories would rush back in a powerful wave. The hunger, the failures, the sleepless nights, the sharp sting of pain, and the promise he had made to himself. One evening, he was invited to give a motivational talk at a huge auditorium. Thousands of students, their faces a mixture of excitement and hope, filled every seat. Cameras flashed. Bright lights shone down. But Aarav's eyes weren't looking for the spotlight. He was searching for something else. That same spark of belief he once carried in his own heart. He walked onto the stage, clutching his old notebook. It was torn, its pages faded with time, but to him it was priceless. He looked out at the sea of faces and began softly, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "Years ago," he started, "I sat right where you are sitting today. I was scared, I was lost. I had nothing, no money, no support, no confidence. But I had one thing, I had a dream." The hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone leaned in, hanging on his every word. A gentle smile touched his lips as he continued. "I failed. I cried. I fell. But I didn't quit. Because quitting kills dreams faster than failure ever will." Heads nodded in agreement all across the audience. They felt the truth in his words. Aarav went on, his voice growing stronger. "People told me I couldn't do it. Some laughed at me. Some just ignored me. But I learned that the same people who laugh at you today might be the first to clap for you tomorrow. If you just don't stop." He paused, letting the message sink in, and then held up his tattered notebook. "This notebook carried my dream," he said. "But this," he pointed to his heart, "this carried my belief." The room erupted in applause. When it subsided, he delivered the line that would become his most famous quote. "Success doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who work when no one is watching." He looked directly at the young, eager faces before him and added, "If you have a dream, protect it. People may doubt you, life will definitely test you, but if your heart is honest and your effort is real, one day your dream will find you." Tears welled up in the eyes of many in the audience. Aarav's words weren't just motivation, they were raw truth, born from his own hard-won experience. After the event, as he was leaving the stage, a small boy came running up to him, his eyes shining brightly. "Sir, I want to be like you one day," the boy said breathlessly. Aarav smiled warmly, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and replied, "Don't be like me. Be better than me. Your dream is waiting for you. Go chase it." Later that night, Aarav stood on the rooftop of his hotel. The stars were shining brightly above, just as they had all those years ago when he was just a poor boy with nothing but dreams, talking to the sky. He looked up and whispered, "I made it. But the dream isn't mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who dares to believe." He smiled, closing his eyes and feeling the cool wind against his face. A deep sense of peace washed over him, not because he had achieved success, but because he had become success. Aarav had proven something timeless. You don't need money, fame, or luck to win. All you need is courage, consistency, and the heart to rise again and again, no matter how many times you fall. And as the stars glowed brighter that night, his words seemed to echo softly in the air. I didn't chase success. I became the person success chased. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, your dream is waiting. Until next time.